to stop spreading it. So we all have to do our part and be responsible in assisting in that endeavor till we get through this. Lots of things are going to change before this is over, and that's one of the reasons we're having this call is talk about impacts on our organization, on our member firms and organizations, both industry and government, and to see how we can continue to help each other. So this is going to be an open forum discussion. We'll try to focus on 3 areas to share, either understanding or lessons learned thus far. One is how to operate in this new environment, or this current environment. A second will be how and where can we help, regardless of what our role is, whether it's government or industry or other. What's going on specifically in our region where we can contribute. And then I want would like to address a third topic with a focus on small businesses, because the challenges for our small businesses, I think, are much more extreme than for the large businesses. So if we have anyone who can share insights on how to survive in this environment as a small business, we can share those discussions as well. We'll try to stick to an hour because I know everyone's time is precious, and then we'll get right to it. I'm going to turn over to Ed Chamberlain, to our Vice President, to talk about the ground rules of how we're going to operate, given we have a lot of people on an open forum call. So Ed?
Yeah. So no, thanks, Bill. Again, Ed Chamberlain here on the board for the NoVA Post. Be patient with us, be respectful. I really appreciate, looks like we've got close to 30 people on the line. Would like to do sort of a virtual roll call if we could up front, just really using the chat box. I may call on some folks. I'd like to identify if we have any folks from government, or state, federal, state, or local agencies on the line. I believe I see Mike Darrow as an example, just to identify yourselves in the chat box so that we can identify that for the greater group. There you go. So Mike Darrow from USACE, Norfolk District, appreciate you joining. And if there's any others. The other is, as we get to, so first, please identify yourselves if you're from outside of just industry partners. And then as we get into the discussion, and Bill has a question for the group, if you could just sort of virtually raise your hand in the chat box, and I'll be managing that so that we don't talk over each other. But again, really appreciate you joining for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And I'll just add one more request. If you all have the control box, the long, skinny, tall, skinny one where it shows all the attendees, if you see yourself in there and it only identifies you as like caller number 2, if you know that's you, if you could put in the chat box, caller number 2 is, Fred Jones, and that way we know who attended. Same thing, if there's a couple there, GE, don't know who that is, and there's a couple where you can't tell from the name who the person is, so that would help us keep track of who participated. Okay, so first topic, how to operate in this environment. We're using a tool right now that is an example of one. I mean, all of us, most of us, are working from remotely, and have had to embrace tools to facilitate that. And there's been all kinds of discussion in the news about the pros and cons of various instruments. Our company has started embracing Microsoft Teams. We also have Skype for Business, and it seems to work fairly well, both those. But probably the bigger piece of that is how to get the collaboration and coordination that's necessary to continue business. And I'd like to just throw that open. If anybody has examples that have really done it for them and helped them in their company or their organization, that they could perhaps share with others on the call. And I'll just throw that out as a request for someone to share on something that's worked well.
Don't forget to let us know if you have something to share via the chat box, and then we'll unmute you.
Looks like Steve Hill has a comment.
Unmuted. Okay, good. It notified me. It notified me that I was unmuted. Steve Hill. Bill, if you wave, that it has to be something that worked well. One thing that I would offer is, under the challenges, everybody's got to be on the phone to communicate, or everybody's got to set up an invite. Been very challenging to collaborate, to meet with folks, to make time for people that you typically want to make time for. So I hung an invite last week, open invite, told everybody that it would be kind of a open chat room. Stop on in. If there's somebody else talking, you may have to wait. But a lot of the stuff for the folks that came in, people were listening in, eavesdropping in. So at one point I had 4 or 5 folks listening, and then it allowed me to continue to work. And I had about 6 one-on-ones when there was nobody else in there. So just a technique, hang an old-fashioned chat room, be available in the room, and let folks merge on in from your team if they need to catch up with you.
It's a great suggestion, Steve, and that sort of replicates, walking down the hall into the next office. Mike, it looks like Mike Darrow had some comments as well.
Yep. Can you all hear me?
We can.
All right. Yeah, just have, I guess, 2 comments. One, we've used a lot of WebEx, and we actually did a virtual industry day via WebEx a couple of weeks ago. I think that was a pretty good tool. I think early on we were trying to figure out how to master the use of the technology. Folks have gotten a lot better, but we've been using a lot of WebEx for almost all our meetings. And then, for my daily interactions, we've got Skype for Business, and most of us got laptops and they're working at home, so it's just a quick Skype for Business video call, which has worked pretty good at keeping people engaged and seeing people and checking on folks and actually getting work done. Over.
Thank you, Mike. And that raises, you mentioned WebEx, and that was with USACE. So one of the concerns I think we all have is, which tools is government allowed to use? Because we have a variety of different, government folks that we interact with, and knowing which one you can invite people to that they can actually see, presentations on, as opposed to a call in. And Mike, it may be different for Norfolk than some of the other districts or other organizations, but does anybody have any comments or advice on that? How do we make sure we're using tools that all our stakeholders can access? So it looks like Mike answered, says USACE has WebEx and GoToMeeting, but Skype for Business is internal only. Okay, that's good to know. All right, because we have Skype for Business as well. But any other experiences out there?
I think Mike Campolone had a comment.
Number of folks are touting Microsoft Teams. USDA can use Teams. Okay. Molly Pearson has a comment.
Can you hear?
Go ahead,
Can you hear me, Bill?
Yeah,
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I've actually found this to be a challenge. The government organizations that I typically work with, we've tried to, and Zoom is something that a lot of my clients typically, industry wants to use Zoom for one example, and the government has told me many times now, hey, we're just doing telecons, and we'll, email us the charts and we'll just do telecons. So that has been I found that to be a challenge, and I'm interested to hear what others are saying here. But Zoom is being told, or they're saying Zoom is just not secure enough for them, and they do not want to use that one. But interested to hear what others say. Over.
Thanks, Molly. So I see a lot of in the comments. I see a lot of endorsement for Teams. I'm kind of new. Let's see. So Mike says actually Use can use Zoom. Okay, Mike. And then yeah, Zoom has some issues. Nick Disport says that Microsoft Teams, Skype in-house, but we've been GoToMeeting in Zoom. Okay, a lot of Zoom naysayers in the remarks. A lot of Teams and Cisco WebEx. Yeah, so those seem to be the big ones. So Zoom, maybe. WebEx, yes. Teams is a yes. A lot of folks use Skype for business, but more internally is what I'm seeing as sort of the consensus. So with Teams, I think I know for me personally, there's a little bit of a learning curve on access and controlling the invites and all of that, and it can also become yet a whole other set of emails and messages that you have to read and stay up on. So that's one of the downsides of moving a project or a program over to Teams. Any other comments on operating, on how to facilitate operations? So we talked about, the digital space. What about processes or other sorts of things, how to replicate what we normally do in our offices and keeping that sort of connectivity going virtually. Any thoughts or experiences on that? And folks who are typing into the chat, I mean, please feel free to just say comment and we'll let you talk, so we don't have to all get the input by reading your texts.
Looks like Tyler needs to be in.
Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Hi there. One of the other tools that we're using a lot is the Bluebeam Studios. So especially with my employees, how we would mark up plans and make revisions and everything. That's a really useful tool because we can all be in the same document at the same time, marking up things, and really kind of looking at the same plan at the same time. And it's a little bit different than a shared screen because we can both interact with the document in real time together. So that's been really useful for us.
And Tyler, what was the name of that program again?
Bluebeam, it's sort of like a PDF editor. It's a lot of consultants use it in design, and they have a part of Bluebeam is Bluebeam Studios that allows shared collaboration.
That's great to know, because yeah, there's more than just sharing PowerPoints. It's sometimes there's actually work that has to be done, right? We got to be able to normally we'd huddle over a table or all sit behind somebody's chair and point at the screen and discuss it, but it's hard to do that when we're in 3 different neighborhoods. So one thing that some of our managers have encouraged is, normally on these collaborative call type things, you don't bother with cameras, right? But there's been some thought that maybe it's good to turn the camera on now again, like when you're talking, so because we miss that. We miss seeing our coworkers and having that personal interaction. And as much as we love our spouses and our kids, it's nice to see somebody else's face now and then. Any thoughts or comments on that? And I'll turn my camera on just for a second.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're going to say that comment. You got to turn on your camera.
I don't know. Can you see me? Does it work?
Yes, we got you. It's unfortunate.
Okay, I'm waving, and then I'm going to turn it off. So any thoughts on the interpersonal aspect of doing this remote working that we can share? Any good lessons?
Joe Mangus. I was just on a hiring panel call, and the person being interviewed, they were wearing a suit, and we had all our cameras on. But most everybody else is pretty casual. And I think one of the things that to make this work better is you almost got to set a standard for what's the what's appropriate to wear and let people know. Otherwise, they don't. It's not a commonality about you dress one way when you're teleworking and another way when you're in the office. I was on a call or Skype earlier this week with one of my employees, and they were teleworking, and they had two kids crawling over them the entire conversation because that's just the nature of what we do now. I think it probably put her in a difficult spot. So maybe the camera shouldn't have been on. We just don't have guidelines yet.
Thanks, Joe. That's a good point. I see Mark wants to make a comment.
Yeah, this is Mark. Thanks so very much. I want to follow up with that comment, but more of a humorous way of looking at it. I think a lot of us that when we see the Skype calls on the news, for example, or through Zoom as we're going forward, not only are we getting audio and visual content about messages, but I think we're all picking up a lot of information on the background, saying, oh, look at that guy's, pictures, or look at that guy's furniture, or, just like you say, the children running around. I'm not sure if we're ever really going to get there in terms of standardization, but certainly having some notion of what's an appropriate etiquette, I think is the appropriate term to use. For example, if there is a light on your ceiling behind you, an office light or a ceiling light, that tends to reduce the visual impact of your own particular face, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. And then some people's faces are really close to the camera, as an example. Others are further away, so you sort of get a broad picture of the room. I don't know if there's any real etiquette or standards associated with all that, but it's just something to be conscious of. Over.
That's a great suggestion. Just advise people on some of those considerations. I was probably guilty of the light on. I just realized that. I look behind me and there's lights on my ceiling and on my wall, so I'm probably guilty of that. Part of, I think, someone mentioned, the kids crawling and kind of craziness. I mean, part of it helps us stay a little, keep our sense of humor going too. I heard on the radio this morning that the police in Maryland had put out a notice to remind people to at least put a pair of pants on before they go out and get their mail.
Oh, wow.
Hey, Bill, this is Nick Desport. I've got some thoughts on that.
Go ahead. About wearing pants or other thoughts?
Not the pants piece. So I'm someone who works from home as a regular. So I've been doing this for a while. And my office is in Denver, the main office, and I collaborate a lot with Florida and Texas. So we talk and have used Skype and MS Teams almost daily, sometimes 2-3 times a day, and use generally the voice only. And that's a great way to collaborate. And so any system anyone's got, that works very, very well. What I have noticed now in meetings where we're having videos, a couple of the points. The background can be very distracting for people when you've got a lot of people viewed. I think I saw a comment maybe from Kathy Off. If you all aren't aware, Microsoft Teams has an option for blurring the background. So you just see the person and not what's behind them. As this is something new, I think there's a lot of supervisors acceptable to whatever. I've heard comments about, not washing your hair and this and that, and people talking about being in robes and everything. And I think that's probably lending us towards, we probably ought to develop standards as a community within companies. So I suspect that's going to come. And people, showing pictures of pets and all of that. All of that was something prior to COVID-19 that I never did. I was always cautious of what's the background if I went to video. Knowing we weren't using video, was the one thing. But when we shifted to this, I didn't think it should be a free-for-all. And I think to a few other people's points, it has somewhat become a free-for-all. I have heard the same thing Joe Manis mentioned. We were interviewing someone, and I talked to him, and he knew he was going to be on video. He was in a suit. Our company people were patched in from 3 different locations. They did not dress the same way. And I think those are things companies just have to think about. What is the standard? If you're going to be on a video with the Corps of Engineers or NAVFAC or AVTEC on a project, how should you be dressing? So sorry if I rambled on a little long, but I think it's a great idea that standards are probably something that companies want to consider.
Well, thanks, Nick. I think that's all food for thought, and we should all consider that and talk about it with our home companies and organizations. So, okay, with that, are there any other topics related to how to operate in this environment? And if not, we'll move to the next one, which is how to help in this environment, particularly in the Northern Virginia area. Okay, seeing none, we'll switch now to what's going on locally and how to help. Kathy, can you switch over so I can show my screen?
That's
Okay, what I have, tell me when you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so what I have up on here right now is the Corps of Engineers website for coronavirus, and hopefully all of you, if you're in this sort of support business, then I'm sure you've seen it. But if you're not, I just want to share with you what's going on with the Corps of Engineers. I think you've all seen the Chief General Semonite is doing a great job all over the country with all our district commanders and working with local communities and states and coming up with basically a couple of different approaches. You see the first one here, building out or retrofitting existing spaces into alternate care facilities, and then facilitating field medical units, and there's some things going on with temporary medical enclosures, and the chief shared with some folks some of the concepts they're working on with the RDC, and they've got a plan. So it's really moving along. There's a great, if you just type USACE or Google and come up with their website, you'll see the links to the COVID sites. But they have a great dashboard that shows what they're working on, and then there's a list of all the different facilities that they've worked on. Many of us are involved in groups bidding and trying to help. And Steve Hill, are you still on? I was wondering, Steve, maybe you could talk a little bit, just as an example of what our company's doing to help with this.
I am on. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. We've done a couple things. The first was to try and get a sense of what the requirements are through the Corps, and I think everybody was working to do that. We quickly discovered that you needed to have kind of a full service package, which is kind of a design build a capability. So we circled back with some partners that we've been working with, and we put together, kind of a specialized team, but with known commodities to cover the full 360 of design build capabilities. With WSP, we also have emergency response, disaster response teams specifically that had kind of rolled in with the old Lewis Berger team when we merged with WSP, and WSP had their capabilities. So we blended all that together. We sent out our placemat. We've been heavily engaged. The work is sporadic as everybody's trying to sort out what's coming next. But we've put together a very good design build team that we're going to try to utilize even as we go forward as the environment changes. And I think on our side, the biggest set of questions are, where do we help? What's going to come next? If you can't spend 3-4 months to deliver a facility as things start, are there going to be requirements for that type of stuff in the future? And I think all of us are probably going through that same list of where will be the needs. Last point is we had one very good discussion with a doctor who runs a good part of the hospital system in New York City. And we were talking to him about doing some retrofits on the hotels. And he said, the big retrofits takes too long. The lower level, potentially. But he said, from my perspective as a doctor, what we're concerned about is when the patients leave the hospital and all he's seeing is COVID patients. None of his normal patients are there at all. They're all stay at home. But he said when the COVID patients are released, they're going to need 3, 6, 9 months or longer of considerable care, not ICU, not necessarily hospital care, but that's a need. So that's one item that he put on the table, and I think everybody's trying to evaluate where might we in this community go ahead and help. And that's what we tried to put our partnership with some of our teammates in the design build mode so that we're ready to help with whatever the next phase is. Glad to answer any questions on the two things we've done, but Bill, thanks for letting me comment.
Thank you, Steve. And let me open it up to any other members, firms, or government organizations. Obviously, USACE is in the middle of all this, but anybody else have some firsthand experience of participating in the solutions for the medical facility crunch right now, or any other thing related to facilitating current operations against COVID? Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Bill, it's Mike there. I have to drop off shortly, but I guess the one thing I would say from USAID's perspective, I mean, at least starting out, it's really established relationships were important. And I talked to a lot of SAME partner organizations, and folks reached out to me largely through SAME with capabilities, and that really helps build at least our strategy going forward. So that's extremely helpful. Most of those folks that you're seeing on the screen there, I mean, all those folks that been reached out to us. I know it's probably tough for the industry folks because everyone was going directly to each district as we're trying to sort it out. But it was really all about established relationships up front that made a huge difference in the ability to react quickly. Over.
Thank you, Mike. I absolutely applaud that, and that's why we have this organization. It's about national security, and all of us having a role in it. And this is one that's very close to home this time. Usually it's overseas someplace, but this one's very close to home. Anybody else have some knowledge or experience of something that's upcoming, maybe particularly in this area? For example, I saw a report the other day that the next large convention center conversion, they're looking at the Dulles Expo Center for this region. We haven't seen that come out on any announcements yet, but has anyone else been talking to hospital systems or locally that give us all a heads up on where the needs are? Any other inputs or any knowledge? If not, let me just say that I highly encourage folks, if you want to be involved in this and your company has resources that can contribute, would highly recommend going to the USA site. Look at the types of, there's some great guidance. There's I'll call them 15-20% design sketches for concepts, and then the companies that take this on take it the rest of the way on the ground with USACE and local stakeholders, and take it the rest of the way, and they're building the swing space that's needed to take the stress off our hospitals. So it's a great endeavor, and as Steve said, what's next? What's the next need? I heard the chief say on a call, on an interview on NPR the other day that what the hope is that this first wave passes, and that USACE working with FEMA and the White House will be able to, and states will be able to determine a more deliberate plan and approach for physical preparation for the fall if there's a resurgence of COVID in the United States in the fall. So all of us who have the ability to participate in that, I think we need to, because it's about our national security and our health. So hopefully that we'll keep being able to contribute where we can, and that's part of what we're all about. Any thoughts from anyone on that topic before we move to the next one, which is small business focus? Okay, next topic is small business focus, and there's lots of information that's come out from the first CARES Act, and in particularly there's Section 3610 of the CARES Act, which provides for, well, actually it provides to everyone continuation of services for our government contracts where we're not able to physically, operate, where the contract calls for. So that's one aspect. But specific to small businesses is the Paycheck Protection Programs. Just curious, we have a lot of small business partners in the NoVA Post. Has anyone had any experience or thus far or success utilizing any of those plans? And if you're not familiar with them and you're a small business, raise your hand and we'll send some stuff to you on it. Any questions or thoughts? So,
Julie had one.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie. Why don't you tell us what's going on with you guys?
Well, I don't know a whole lot myself. I've just been told that they have submitted all the paperwork that was necessary. Sounded like it was a kind of a heavy lift, but I'm not totally positive. But they're just waiting for any response back. But that's been like over a week.
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll have good luck with it, and maybe you can report out to the rest of us how to use it. For those, can you still see my screen? Are you guys still seeing my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So this is the overview from the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program. There's some really key points in this. It's the funds are provided in the form of loans that will be fully forgiven, provided you have the right mix. It's primarily to be used for payroll, okay, and you can use it for some other things, but as long as it's been primarily used for payroll and keeping your workforce employed at full salary, or be able to rehire them quickly once this period ends, those loans will be forgiven. So it's basically getting a free payroll reimbursement during this period. So if you're a small business and I'd be surprised if you're not familiar with this, but if you aren't, I implore you to look at the CARES Act websites and it just all you have to do is Google PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, and there's all kinds of information out there available. Small Business Administration is the lead. Any thoughts or questions on this? So good luck to you, those of you who are taking advantage of it. It's there for you. It's there to keep your employees paid for while we have a significant amount of business turned down. So that's a concern for all of us. Are there any other COVID related topics that anyone wants to input for? Remember now, this was supposed to be a collaborative discussion. There's no experts on the call. We're all our own experts for this one. Anyone else have anything else to add? Kathy asked if there's concerns about cash flow. That's a great question. I think I think all of us are probably experiencing similar issues with a workforce that's operating from home. Things aren't necessarily as efficient, so the whole business of accounts receivable and accounts payable has been delayed, and I think all of us are having difficulty keeping that system moving, and that of course affects cash flow and cash balances. The smaller the business is, the harder that is to handle, and it is a challenge. I don't have any answers other than figure out if under this new operating mode, if things are really slowing down, we've had to go in and ask ourselves, okay, what's the source of the friction? And are there some exceptions to policies or procedures we can put in place temporarily to help speed things up so that we don't have a backlog of either AR or AP? Has anybody else had any experiences with this? So we're probably getting to some sensitive internal company business topics, so I'll just leave it at that. So at this point, let me switch gears and just make a couple comments about SAME National. Hopefully you will have seen the announcements for National about, JETSI was canceled, and the physical JETSI was canceled. However, National is working hardcore on developing a program for a virtual JETSI, and I'm really looking forward to that. We were very looking forward to a physical JETSI here in our backyard. That would have been great for so many of our members who wouldn't necessarily be able to attend one distant, but they would be able to attend one locally. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But we're still going to have an event that should be worth everyone's time, and we'll watch for that. Watch for the details on that as they come out. So, Kathy, do you want to say anything about National, about what's going on with the latest on the planning for the National, for the virtual JETSI?
I think you covered it all. We're going to be using a platform from eShow, which is our event platform to begin with, but they have a virtual platform as well. So we're learning that and actively building the JTC to be virtual. Some of the events that have to be in person are going to take place elsewhere, maybe at Post Leaders Workshop or the Small Business Conference, assuming those events continue. But we'll just keep sending everybody information to give everybody updates.
Very good, thank you, Kathy. And also for post level activities, we're looking at the possibility of a May event. We're working on speakers, and of course we want it to be something that's relevant and pertinent given the times, but also try to keep a little sense of normalcy for our normal business. We'll find that right mix and come up with something for May, or we may just defer to the JETSI being in May virtually. And then June, we're looking ahead. We currently have scheduled a military engineering panel on the 11th of June. That obviously will have to be switched to virtual. Unless the speakers they're all military, they're all pretty busy right now. We have to see if they're still available for a virtual event, but we'll be in touch with everyone through email.
Hey Bill, this is Jenny. Can I address the attendees, please? I want to take advantage of it before they start hanging out.
Yep, go ahead.
The question for everybody, I got on a multiple call the last few days and with clients and friends of mine that was actually told they're having so much hard time in finding or getting into the FedBizOps where it used to be, and now it's combined with SAM. So is anybody in this group that would be benefiting if we somehow put out a webinar for you guys, for all of our members, to say maybe a 30-minute to a 45-minute, just to show those concerns, or perhaps your employees, just to find out how to maneuver around that website if in fact you guys are having trouble finding opportunities on BizOps because it's now in sam.gov. Anybody? Somebody said yes, please.
Yes, we're referring to Beta Sam, which is doesn't sound to me, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of way to go. Absolutely, Beta Sam. So yeah, I did actually get a request from other members asking about Beta Sam help. So Jenny, I think we have a 2 thumbs up for that topic.
Okay, so out of the 37 that I can still see in attendee, is that something that would benefit you guys as well? I just wanted to get a tally. That way, it's worth of everybody's time, of course, because we don't want to take too much of your time, especially if we're going to put it out in May, and all of the back-to-back conference call that you guys are having for your firm alone. And we just want to do that for you guys as a member of SAMI. Yes, yes, okay, yes. All right.
Good.
Okay, good. We will try to get that done for you guys for the month of May, and obviously a little bit distant from the JETC that is upcoming as well. That way it's not going to take your time away from that, because JETC, attending that JETC virtual is absolutely amazing. So I think I encourage everybody to do that. So we will send briefings or information about it in the next few days. So watch out for that. And I hope that you guys also participate.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that.
Sure.
So that's it for our program for today, unless anyone has any other thoughts or comments.
Joe Manus, I do have one other thing going back to the COVID exposure. Most of our conversations are, how do we deal with the situation we have now? And that's extraordinarily relevant. But as we look at the opening, whatever that means exactly, I suppose it's the lifting of orders for some things to be closed. How does our society approach this is really not clear, and I don't think anybody's figured it out. Some of this is societal or cultural acceptance of being in a pandemic. If there were any other type of issue other than one that affects our friends, our family, we would probably look at it from a risk characterization perspective and try to figure out, how do we minimize risk other than just social distancing and saying, well, that's it. What employees are better suited for some jobs than others because of a new normal we have, or at least the one that's temporary as we try to get past this current surge. And really nobody's talking about that. And I suspect most of that is because no one wants to take on the liability of establishing a risk of exposure then leading to someone's death. But I think it's one of those topics that is going to come up as we become more sensitized to this environment we're in is going to continue. I mean, let's face it, 45 days ago, no one thought that we would all be shut down. Nobody could accept it. Just couldn't happen. But here we are. And I think we're going to have to figure out how to get to the next stage of what we do, in the possibility that some experts say this could resurge again in bigger, smaller, I have no idea, in the fall and in the winter, because this virus may not just die and be gone like SARS was. It may be something that lingers for a while. But that's just something I throw out there. I don't know that anybody's to that point, but I think it's the next thing on the horizon for us.
Joe, you mentioned
something to ponder.
Yep, no, absolutely, and believe me, we've been thinking about that, and I'll just share with you that we've raised it to the Professional Service Council, which is an organization that represents government contractors with the government, and one of the concerns about liability and all that is, the Department of Energy has already invoked, it's a FAR clause that can be invoked during emergency situations, and the Obama administration used it during the Ebola crisis to basically indemnify contractors who were helping and doing the right thing, because as we all know, no good deed goes unpunished when the dust settles. So we are concerned and looking at when this is all over, there will be groups that will come out and try to, blame someone for something that did or did not happen. So I think it's important to address that now. And we have raised that issue. Hopefully FEMA and USACE will see that and act on it, because it was done last time under Ebola. And I can talk to you separately about that if you have an inroad to raise that through headquarters.
Okay. All right.
Okay, any active or upcoming federal pursuits that they want to share? I'll throw that out. Does anybody have anything hot going on? I mean, one thing that I would offer to folks is to, if you go to the SAME website, you can go to the documents that were supposed to have been presented during Capitol Week, and that's probably one of the best sources of federal programs, not just DoD, but Department of Energy, Architect of the Capitol, all the groups that participate in Capitol Week. And And that's a great source to see what's programmed. Now, of course, those programs, those documents were designed and built before COVID, so we all know that there's going to be big impacts on budget at the federal level. So hard to say what's still going to be active on those projections. But I would recommend looking there to see at least what the plans were, and we'll see how much of that survives with the budget changes that are coming. Any other comments on that? Question is, do we know if the military or federal will be cutting budgets for projects? Well, I think that remains to be seen. Does anybody have any insight on that?
Yeah, that's pretty specific to the client, to the project, and what stage it's in. There's no one answer to any of those.
So before we close, I would like to just ask if you're willing to give us some feedback on this forum and format. This was our first attempt at doing something like this, and was it helpful? Do you have suggestions for how we could do this better? Because I think we're going to be using this mode for a while.
Yes, we would appreciate that, definitely. You guys have my email on the invite that was sent out. If you guys have any suggestions that can actually benefit most of our members, please let me know, and we will take a look at it and present it to everybody.
Okay, with that, I want to thank everyone for participating, and stay tuned for future events, and most importantly, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bill.